Welcome to my Azure Quick Hits video series. And in this session, I'm going to walk you through the routing that's required when you set up a vWAN with Azure VMware Solution and an on-premise data center. We're going to go through the ExpressRoute connections, the ExpressRoute Global Reach connections, and we're going to look at the routing to understand what we're actually doing. We'll look at the route tables on each of these devices. Pre-built in the lab, we've got a vWAN hub, we've got a VNet, an Azure VNet with an app gateway in it. We've got a couple of workloads here, just a couple of web servers, and we've got an ExpressRoute circuit. None of these are connected together. Oh, other than these, of course. So to get started, we're going to build this circuit between AVS and the secured vWAN. And then we're going to see what routes are available. Second piece we're going to build is the ExpressRoute connection to the on-premise data center. Right? So you would think we'd be able to get from on-premise into AVS, but we won't, and we'll explain why. And then in order to overcome that, the third part we're going to do is ExpressRoute Global Reach. And then finally, we're going to enable secure vWAN hub, and we're going to force all traffic in this environment out through this firewall. So to connect the AVS environment to the vWAN hub, we need an authorization key. We get that from going to the connectivity and then click on authorization key. I've already got one built for this, but all you have to do is enter the name and hit create. As soon as it appears, copy the key and then flip over to the virtual WAN, go to ExpressRoute and click on Redeem Authorization Key. At this point, you're going to put the key in, go back to the AVS SDDC and select the ExpressRoute ID. Go back to Redeem Authorization Key, punch that in, automatically associate it, and click Add. A minute or two later, you're going to see updated ExpressRoute connections. If we close this, you're going to see a TNT number. TNT is always used when it's coming from AVS. 0 megabits per second. That's normal. It's actually a really fast connection. It's 40 gig or 80 gig connection. And most importantly, the connection provisioning state succeeded. Now let's take a look at the effective routes. So what routes are being advertised from AVS into this empty vWAN? Select the default route, and you can see we have a pretty small number of routes being advertised here. This includes the AVS management routes, the routes that are defined inside AVS. So what I'm talking about there are these guys, the segments that we've already defined inside AVS, and then the IP addresses related to the services we've started, like the vWAN. Returning to the route table for a second, let's look at this 192.168.100 address. That's one of the VNets that exists, or one of the VLANs that exist inside the AVS environment. And as far as the hub is concerned, that has an AS path of 12076. That represents the ExpressRoute gateway, and 398656. That represents the DMSEE, or the dedicated MSEE device inside AVS. Now let's add the tiered network in and then take a look at the network table again. So we'll go back up to the vWAN. We're going to go to virtual network connections, and we're going to add, so this one's going to be X2, used for testing. We'll choose the hub. We'll choose the resource group, WestUS2, and then the virtual network is used for testing. Leave the defaults all the same and click create. Now that's successfully added. Let's go back to the hub and look at the routes on the hub again. Choose the default route. And now we should be able to see 10.280.0/22 virtual network connection connected to use for testing. Notice there's no ASN number here. This is directly a VNet connection, so there's no ASN. So now let's build the second part, which is this ExpressRoute connection from AVS vWAN to the MSEE device that connects us to the on-premise data center. And this on-premise data center has a 172.2186.0/24 address. In fact, there's quite a few because this is a fairly big lab, but the one we're interested in is that. So to do that, we're going to go back to the virtual hub, go to ExpressRoute, and redeem another authorization. And this authorization we're going to get from the Building 25 circuit, lab circuit here. Click on authorizations, and we're going to create a new one called to AVS MG Demo vWAN. Then click on save. Then we're going to copy the authorization key, go back to redeem authorization key, put it in there. Go back and get the peer circuit. That's this guy here. Click on this and automatically associate this ExpressRoute with the hub. Click Add. And now we wait for this ExpressRoute connection to update and appear here in the list of ExpressRoutes. Once it's finished, click refresh and we'll see it's succeeded as well. We can now go to effective routes, choose default, and this time we're going to download and open up the Excel spreadsheet. And we'll just do a quick sort here. And we're now going to look for that 172 network that would tell us we're receiving routes from the on-premise 172.2186.0/24. So we know we're getting the on-premise routes. In fact, all of these are on-premise routes, but this is the one we're interested in. Now let's go back to the ExpressRoute circuit that we connected to, and let's look at the route table for that ExpressRoute circuit. We're going to click on Download and then open the file. If we now look for 1040.144.0, we're not going to see it. So looking back at the diagram, even though we have a connection from AVS to vWAN and from vWAN to this circuit, and that's because we don't exchange those routes. And so this is where ExpressRoute Global Reach comes in. So let's configure that now. First, let's switch to the private cloud. We're going to go to Connectivity, and this time we're going to choose Global Reach, and we're going to add a connection. The connection here is going to be using a circuit ID and authorization key. And so to get that, we're going to go back to the Building 25 circuit and go to Authorizations, and we're going to create one called 2AVS 2.0 FTA West US2 Global Reach. And then we're going to click on Save. Once that's complete, copy the license key, go back to the cloud, type in your key, go back to the circuit description, grab the circuit ID, back to the cloud, type that in, and click on Create. Once it's completed, you'll see we're connected. And now we're going to go back and take a look at the route table that exists on the Building 25 circuit. So we're going to go here, go to Overview, View Route Table, download the route table, open the Excel spreadsheet. And now we're going to see a 1040.144 series of networks. These are the management networks. Let's make that a little bigger. These are the management networks from AVS. So that means the on-premise ExpressRoute circuit now knows where AVS is. So let's start by opening our jump box up, opening up a browser. This is a jump box that's in Azure, and we're going to check we can actually reach the on-premise environment. So that's going to be an HTTPS. Well, by default, it's going to take us to the AVS vCenter, and that seems to be working just fine. Excellent. And now let's try accessing one that's on-premise. So HTTPS //172.21 86.216, and looks like that's working as well. Okay, so that's great. We have access to both from Azure itself. Now let's RDP into an on-premise machine, 172.21.86.14. It's a Windows server that's on-prem, and we will open up Chrome, the vCenter console in the SDDC, the private cloud, and looks like that's working. So just before we leave this area, I'm going to show you one of the common mistakes we see, and that is that customers will build the ExpressRoute Global Reach, give their on-premise connectivity into AVS. They will establish an ExpressRoute connection to the secured vWAN to give access to their Azure infrastructure, but they fail to put in the ExpressRoute connection here. And if they don't have that, what happens is you still have a path. So let's remove that for a second. You still have a path through the ExpressRoute, through the MSE device, down into AVS. And if we take an example, here's the jump box, and the jump box going to AVS. This is to the vCenter console in AVS, 9 milliseconds. The jump box to on-prem is only 6 milliseconds, so that's the correct path going that way. And then the on-premise to AVS over Global Reach, well, that's going to work just fine, about 5 milliseconds. But if you do have this ExpressRoute in place, the jump box connectivity into AVS drops just to a millisecond. And this is really important because if you imagine, I mean, this is a very good example and it's only 9 milliseconds compared to 1 millisecond, but I have seen it where it's up to 30 milliseconds slower to go through this path than it is to go through the direct ExpressRoute to AVS. So just be aware of that. You do need this connection as well. So for the next part of this demo, we're going to take the hub and we're going to convert it into a secure vWAN hub. And you do that by just clicking the Firewall Manager, and you can see we've highlighted the hub we've got what we want here. In this case, it's our demo hub, Azure Firewall, Security Partner Provider. So in this case, we are not using anybody, right? We're going to just use Azure Firewall. We're not using Zscaler, Checkpoint, or iBoss. And click Confirm, and that will start this deployment. This took 9 minutes to complete. Close that, go to Resource, and we can see our firewall here in the vWAN hub. So let's go back to Virtual WANs, go back to the demo vWAN, and you're going to now see we've got a hub. This icon's turned red, and which means it is a secure hub. Click on this, and then select Azure Firewall and Firewall Manager, click on the blue line, and you're going to see we have our secure hub here. So before we get into security configuration and what the issue that routing intent solves, let's take a step back and look at what happens when we look at a machine that's inside the AVS environment trying to get to the internet. And so to do that, we're going to go to our jump box. And in the jump box, I've logged into the vCenter server, gone to the server 01, and then launched the console. And you can see if I try to get to the internet at this point, nothing's going to happen, right? It has no path out. And that's what routing intent is going to solve. It's going to advertise a quad 0 route to everything that it's connected to the vWAN hub, telling everything that requires an internet access to go to the Azure firewall. So in this case, we're going to choose internet traffic, Azure firewall, and save. It's definitely worth reading this message. Please note that securing internet traffic will cause the vWAN hub to advertise the default route, in other words quad 0, to the internet with next hop as Azure firewall. This will disrupt internet connectivity for all hub connections and must be done during maintenance hours to avoid impact to production workloads. Do you want to continue? Yes, or okay in this case. So while we're waiting for this, is this going to solve my problem for AVS workload machines unable to access the internet? So once that is completed, you're going to see that the connections, VNet connection and the two ExpressRoute connections, are all protected by Azure Firewall. So if we went back to the jump box and I now type in cnn.com, am I going to get anywhere? And the answer is going to be no, because we still haven't configured the firewall to actually allow traffic through. The default policy is deny. So now we have to create a policy. So in the blue search bar, type in firewall policies. And we're going to go create. The resource group is going to be when we're building all this stuff in. The name is going to be demo to internet. The region will be West US 2. And it's going to be standard tier. And there is no parent policy. DNS settings, we're not using DNS. We're not going to use TLS. Next, we're going to do rules. So we have to add a rule collection. It's going to be demo to internet rule. It's a network rule, and we can set this at 300. It's just an order of precedence. And then demo rule, IP addresses. So it's going to be all IP addresses, all protocols, any port, and to any IP address. So basically we're creating a rule that says allow anything, add, review and create, and create. When it's complete, go to virtual WANs, demo WAN, open up the hub, go to firewall manager on this guy, open up our secure hub, go to security providers, click on add policy, and we're going to choose our demo to internet standard policy. Click on save, wait for the updating associations to complete, and we should be good to go. So if we flick back over to the server we have running inside AVS, and we type in ipaddress.com, it's 2232.47.98. That looks good. Type in cnn.com, and we're getting through to CNN. Last thing we're going to do, we're going to check this 230.247.98 and make sure that that is our Azure Firewall IP address. And the way we do that is to switch back to our portal, click on public IP configuration, 230.247.98. We have now configured our environment to talk out to the internet via the Azure Firewall in a secure vWAN hub.